You know, when we talk about learning a new language, we always think about those like practical first steps,
Right.
like greetings or ordering food or just finding your way around, you know. But
Yeah.
what if I told you that even just like a little peek into how a language works, like its grammar,
Yeah.
could actually reveal a lot more than just how to say hello?
It's true. And with Spanish, like this deep dive into grammar takes us way back to 1492.
Okay, now that's a history lesson I wasn't quite expecting. What happened in 1492 that involved Spanish grammar?
Well, picture this. Queen Isabella
Okay.
being presented with the first ever published grammar
Wow.
of a European vernacular language, and it's Spanish.
Really?
Talk about being organized.
Wow.
This Gramática de la Lengua Castellana really set the stage for how Spanish would develop and spread.
So from the very beginning, there was this emphasis on having like clearly defined rules.
Yes.
That's interesting because when I think of Spanish, I do get this sense of structure, almost like everything has its place.
Exactly. And that structure comes from those carefully documented rules, and nowhere is that more evident than in the heart of the language. Verbs.
I'll admit, verbs have always been a bit of a mystery to me.
Really?
No matter what language we're talking about,
Yeah.
they just seem to have so many moving parts.
It's like they're the engine of the sentence, wouldn't you say? And in Spanish, those engines are like finely tuned machines. You've got your three main groups, those trusty are, and ear verbs, and each one has its own special way of conjugating.
Okay, so we're already talking about conjugation.
Yeah.
I remember those charts from school.
Yeah.
Rows and columns of verb endings.
Right.
Is it really that important to master all of that?
Well, here's the thing about conjugation. It allows Spanish to express really subtle shades of meaning, sometimes in ways that English just can't quite capture.
Okay.
For example, you've got your preterite and imperfect tenses,
Right.
both used for talking about the past, but in distinct ways.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me.
Oh.
What's the difference?
The preterite is like a snapshot,
Okay.
a single completed action in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Think like, I ate the apple.
Right.
But the imperfect,
Yeah.
that's more like a video showing us an action that was ongoing or habitual.
Okay.
So you might say, I was eating the apple when you called.
So one tells us what happened, and the other sets the scene,
Yes.
adding that extra layer of detail.
You got it. And then there's that mysterious realm of the subjunctive mood. It's where things get really interesting.
I'll be honest.
Mm-hmm.
The subjunctive always sounded a bit intimidating.
Really?
Like something you'd only use in like formal speeches or something?
Not at all. It's actually how Spanish expresses those less concrete ideas.
Okay.
Doubts, desires, emotions, the things that make our language interesting. Imagine wanting to say, I hope you feel better.
Right.
In English, it's pretty straightforward. But in Spanish, you'd use the subjunctive because you're expressing a wish or a hope, not a certainty.
So it's not just about what's being said, but the feeling behind it. Like you were saying before, those subtle shades of meaning that Spanish is known for.
Exactly. And it actually reflects a fascinating aspect of Spanish culture. The subjunctive allows for this nuance and indirect communication that's very much a part of their social dynamics.
It makes you realize that grammar isn't just about memorizing rules.
Right.
It's like a window into how people think and interact.
It is.
I'm starting to see Spanish in a whole new light.
That's great. And we're just getting started. Verbs might be the heart of the matter, but Spanish grammar has a whole lot more to offer. For example, even something as seemingly simple as where you put an adjective can reveal a lot about the language's rhythm and flow.
You're right. I've always found it fascinating that in Spanish, adjectives often come after the noun, like el coche rojo, the car red.
Right.
It's almost like you're adding a little flourish at the end.
It's true. And while it might seem like a small detail, that shift in word order changes the emphasis and the musicality of the sentence.
So even the placement of a word can change the entire feel of what you're saying.
Absolutely. And it's these subtle nuances, these seemingly small grammatical quirks that make learning a new language so rewarding.
I'm starting to think of Spanish grammar less like a rule book and more like a puzzle box, full of these fascinating little details.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And as we delve deeper into this puzzle box, we'll uncover even more about the intricacies of Spanish grammar and how it reflects the culture and history of the Spanish-speaking world.
This is already so much more interesting than I expected.
Yeah.
But what about those other pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah.
Like nouns, pronouns, all those other grammatical elements.
Right.
Okay. ready to dive back into this treasure chest of Spanish grammar.
Okay.
We've covered the history, those fascinating verbs,
Right.
but I have a feeling there are more surprises in store.
You're absolutely right. One of the most captivating aspects of Spanish is its incredible diversity. Even within the realm of grammar, there are variations and regional quirks that
Yes.
make the language so vibrant.
That's what I love about languages. They're not static. They're constantly evolving and adapting. So where do we start with these Spanish dialects?
Okay.
I'm ready for a linguistic adventure.
Well, our sources mention this fascinating phenomenon called voceo.
Okay.
It's mainly found in parts of South America,
Right.
like Argentina and Uruguay.
Mm-hmm.
And it involves a unique way of addressing someone informally.
Instead of the usual tú, they use vos.
Exactly. But it's not just a simple swap.
Okay.
Voceo has its own distinct set of verb conjugations.
Oh, wow.
For instance, you'd say vos sos instead of tú es for you are.
Wait, so there's a whole other set of verb endings to learn?
Right.
Now, I understand why some people find Spanish verbs daunting.
It can seem like a lot to take in,
Right.
but think of it as adding color and texture to the language.
Okay.
And even within voceo regions, there's variation.
Oh, really?
Some areas use it exclusively,
Wow.
while others blend it with tú.
Interesting.
It's a testament to the fluidity of language
Yeah.
and how it evolves within communities.
That's fascinating. It's like each region has added its own personal touch to the language. It reminds me of how English has so many different accents and dialects.
Precisely. And just like with those English dialects, these variations in Spanish add richness and depth to the language, making it feel even more alive.
Speaking of lively, our sources also mentioned some interesting quirks with those third-person object pronouns.
Yes.
I have to admit, pronouns always trip me up a little.
It's understandable. Pronouns can be tricky,
Yeah.
even in our native language. We've
Oh,
got
right.
he, she, him, her.
Why?
It's a lot to keep track of. But Spanish adds another layer of intrigue with its direct and indirect object pronouns.
Okay, refresh my memory. I remember learning about lo and la for direct objects and ley for indirect objects.
Right.
But I'm a little fuzzy on how they all work together.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding the role of the pronoun in the sentence.
Okay.
So you'd say, lo veo,
Right.
I see him, because him is the direct object of the verb see. But in le doy el libro,
Okay.
I give him the book.
Right.
Him is the indirect object
Yeah.
because it's receiving the action indirectly.
I think I'm starting to remember. But then our sources mentioned this thing called leísmo,
Yes.
and things get a little more complicated.
Leísmo is another example of those fascinating regional variations. In some areas, speakers use le for both direct and indirect objects,
Okay.
especially when referring to a male.
Interesting.
So instead of lo veo, you might hear le veo.
So is it right or wrong?
Right.
Or does it depend on who you ask?
That's the beauty of language. There isn't always a clear-cut answer.
Okay.
While the Royal Spanish Academy might prefer the traditional distinction, leísmo is so common in some regions that it's considered perfectly acceptable.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about learning the rules. It's about understanding how people actually use the language
Yeah.
in different contexts.
Yes,
It's about embracing the nuances.
you got it. Language is a living, breathing thing,
Yeah.
constantly evolving and adapting.
Right.
And nowhere is that more evident than in those tiny but mighty words like que that,
Right.
which seem to pop up everywhere in Spanish.
K is like the chameleon of Spanish words. I swear I hear it in almost every sentence.
It's certainly versatile, but even this little word can spark debate with its quirks, like queismo and dequeismo.
Okay. Those sound like characters from the Cervantes novel?
Right.
What's the story with these quid terms?
Don't worry, they're not as intimidating as they sound.
Okay.
Queismo is simply the tendency to use que after a preposition
Okay.
instead of the more formal de que.
Right.
So, me alegro de que estés aquí. I'm happy that you're here.
Okay.
Might become me alegro que estés aquí.
So it's like a grammatical shortcut.
Exactly. And then you have dequismo,
Right.
which is the opposite. Adding an unnecessary de before que, you might hear, pienso de que es una buena idea, when the correct form would be, pienso que es una buena idea. I think that it's a good idea.
So both queismo and dequeismo involve this little word que, but in slightly different ways.
Right.
It's amazing how even the smallest elements of language can have these regional variations.
It's a reminder that language is constantly being shaped and molded by the people who use it. And these variations, far from being mistakes add to the richness and diversity of the language as a whole.
This is really making me think differently about correct grammar. It seems like there's often more than one right way to say things.
Yeah.
Depending where you are and who you're talking to.
Precisely. And that's what makes language learning so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing a set of rules.
Right.
It's about understanding the nuances
Right.
and embracing the variations that make each language unique.
I couldn't agree more. So we've journeyed through those intriguing verbs, explored the colorful world of dialects, and untangled the mysteries of Q. What other linguistic gems are waiting to be discovered?
Well, we've talked about how Spanish verbs are like these finely tuned engines,
Right.
and how even small words like Q can have this surprising depth.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another grammatical piece I think we should unearth. Clitics.
Cletics. That sounds a bit like something you'd find in, like, a science fiction novel.
All right.
What are those?
Think of clitics like those tiny but essential parts that hold a larger structure together.
Okay.
They might be small, but they play a crucial role in how a sentence works.
Right.
In Spanish, one of the most intriguing clitics is the word se.
Say. Okay, that one definitely rings a bell, but I could use a little refresher on how it works.
It's understandable. Se is known for wearing many hats in Spanish grammar.
Right.
It can be a reflexive pronoun, so when you say se lava,
Right.
he washes himself. That se indicates the action is reflected back on the subject.
So, like, when you're talking about someone getting ready in the morning,
Yes,
or, like, doing something to themselves.
exactly. But it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Se can also be reciprocal,
Okay.
showing an action happening between two or more people.
Right.
Se abrazan.
Right.
They hug each other.
Okay.
Use a se to show that the hug is like a two-way street.
Wow, so it's like say is adapting to the situation,
Yeah,
changing its meaning based on the context. It's like a grammatical chameleon.
I like that analogy. And its transformative powers don't end there.
Okay.
Se can even be impersonal,
Okay.
creating those phrases like se dish,
Right.
it is said, or one says, where you're not talking about a specific person, but a more general idea.
It's like those sayings you hear all the time, those like bits of wisdom that everyone seems to know.
Precisely. But here's where se gets really interesting. It can also be used to form what grammarians call reflexive passive constructions.
Okay, you'd have to break that down for me. Reflexive passive sounds a bit intimidating.
It's simpler than it sounds. Imagine you want to say, the book was sold.
Okay.
In Spanish, you wouldn't always use a typical passive construction
Okay.
with ser and a past participle.
Right.
Instead, you might use se and the third person's singular form of the verb, se vendió el libro.
So we know the book was sold, but we don't necessarily know by whom.
Exactly.
It's like the focus shifts from the seller to the action itself.
Exactly. It's a way of highlighting the action without emphasizing the doer. And it's a great example of how se, this tiny little word, can subtly change the whole feeling of a sentence.
This is incredible. Who knew that a single word like say could have so many different uses and meanings?
And we've only scratched the surface.
Wow.
Linguists have entire debates about the true nature of se.
Right?
But for our purposes, I think we have uncovered some of its most fascinating secrets.
This whole deep dive has been a revelation. I feel like I've gone from seeing Spanish grammar as like a set of rules to appreciating it as this complex and fascinating system full of these like incredible details.
It's like we've opened up that puzzle box you mentioned earlier and found a whole world of intricate and interconnected pieces.
And the best part is knowing that there's always more to discover.
Yeah.
So to our listeners, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, don't be afraid to, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deeper into the wonders of Spanish grammar.
After all, language learning is a journey, not a destination.
That's a great way to put it.
And like any good adventure, it's the unexpected detours and fascinating discoveries that make it so rewarding.
I couldn't agree more.